I've been drawing for more than 12 years, and after experimenting with different mediums, techniques, supplies, and ultimately finding an art style comfortable for me, I came to the conclusion that in my experience there are some particular things that actually help me. And I decided to condense those into 5 different exercises that you can do daily by implementing them into your drawing routine to actually improve your skills. So today I'll share with you what the experience taught me over the course of 12 years. And if you're new here, hello, I'm Hallie. You can find me around the internet as Halleyvision, and I'm a full-time illustrator focused on character design. Welcome to my art channel. Today we'll talk about understanding perspective, understanding light and shadows, training your hand and building muscle memory, visualization, and conveying emotions. But before we get into it, a small word from today's friendly neighborhood sponsor. Today's video was sponsored by Skillshare, one of the big supporters of my channel, actually a big supporter of real artists and creativity in general, which is what we need today. Skillshare is an online learning community where artists and experts share their knowledge by creating in-depth curated online classes. Whatever it is the topic you wish to learn more about, on Skillshare you can find it. The classes go from drawing, animation, photography, and everything art related to productivity and lifestyle, all taught by professional artists, illustrators, graphic designers, you name it, sharing their knowledge with the world. The class I am currently following is the DaVinci Resolve 20 Masterclass, the complete video editing and color grading class by Adi Singh. I use DaVinci to edit all my videos, and although I know how to use it by now, there's still so much it can offer that I still need to learn. So for such a complex software, having a complete guide perfectly put together is fantastic. And speaking of learning a software, you can also find so many classes dedicated to Procreate. You can learn from professional artists alongside other beginners to hopefully get more creative in 2026. For this video, Skillshare kindly gave us a nice deal. The first 500 people to use my link in the description or scan the QR code will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Thank you so much, Skillshare, for believing in my art and supporting my channel. If you ever followed an art tutorial before, and chances are you did, you probably know the classical scheme to draw a head. So the oval, the X shape, etc. Today I want to cover that same technique but in a simplified way. This is supposed to be an exercise that you should be able to do fast in your sketchbook, your iPad, or whatever you prefer. Now, for convenience, I'll use my iPad today, but you can do it on paper. I think it is better to understand the feeling of the pencil, but more on this later. Now, first of all, let's set up our brush. I am using my usual line art brush. The only difference is that when I sketch, I try to set the stabilization and streamline to an amount that emulates perfectly the paper experience. And I test it and tweak it until I'm satisfied. We do not need perfect lines at this stage, we just need lines that are as much as possible similar to what you would obtain with a pencil. And of course, you probably will need still a little bit of streamline, otherwise it becomes too sensitive. Now, one fun way to understand perspective and the volume of an object is to draw different shapes before trying with the head, like cubes, for example. I used to fill pages and pages with different shapes. Cubes specifically are very fun to draw, and it's very easy to understand perspective by drawing them. They don't need to be perfect. What we are looking for here is a shape that really conveys the depth and volumes of the object. And these are doodles that you can literally do mindlessly while watching a movie or whatever you prefer. Trust me, they really help. And you can obviously do this with different geometric shapes. But let's move on to the head now. So what I usually do is I still create a scheme for the head, but a simplified one. So instead of starting with an oval, I think it is much more useful to start with a simple circle, like this. Once we have a circle, at this stage we can direction the head however we want. So for example, let's assume I want this character to look up. I will still use the X technique, but it will be just a simple X, no additional lines to confuse you. So let's see, maybe the character is looking a little bit to the left, like this, and this is our main line that will divide the two parts of the face. Now, our eyes will obviously not be down here, otherwise our character would be looking this way. So we need the horizontal line to follow a completely different curve. And this is where the circle and the geometric shapes come to a great use. And only now I will add the other part of the oval. And as you can see, I am not going right to the end of the circle, because this is supposed to be our skull. One thing that really helps if you want is making a different circle here that will again evidentiate the volume of the head. I'm gonna add my neck, and as you can see, this is just two simple lines, but it's already taking shape. I will not go any further than this. The exercise is to make as many heads as you wish. Fill out your page if you want, all in different directions. And you will see how the simple circle and the X will guide the rest of the drawing. So let's make more heads. For these exercises, do not look for perfection. What we are looking for is an idea and the creation of the shape. This is what you need to understand. The basic shape is the fundament of every drawing. You will have time to make it perfect later on. I never connect the oval right here. I always keep it a little bit on the middle, not directly in the middle, maybe a little bit right here. In this case it's more of a 3/4 angle, because again this is the base of our skull. Now you might wonder what the difference is compared to what I showed you before, so the classical oval, etc. We are focusing on the circle. The circle is the base of everything instead of the oval. The oval comes after. And this helps not only shape the entire head, but also understand how the skull is actually positioned. Because if you start with an oval, and you've never drawn before and you have no idea of how the head is positioned, you will not be drawn to create that other additional shape to the back like this. This happened to all of us. And there's no volume, like where's the head? So this is a simple exercise that you can do daily, and I really suggest you to do it on paper. Of course, you'll have something to fill your sketchbook with. My favorite exercise for understanding light and shadow is very fun to put into practice, because you can literally apply it to every single drawing you make. I have covered this in many videos in the past, but I never explained why it isn't just a technique, but also a very useful exercise to get better with shadows and lights in general. Let's move on to a different artwork. This is a drawing I just finished coloring, so as you can see, besides the normal shadows you put in the face, cheeks, the nose, etc., it is very flat. So what do I do to render it and make it look like our character is standing into a spotlight maybe, or a different environment? I have my artwork flattened into one single layer. Right here I have the folder with the entire layers, etc. What I do, I simply duplicate this layer and flatten it like this. So we don't need this anymore. So in this exercise, the first thing we're going to do is create a new layer, set it to multiply, then you are going to select your shadow color, kind of a desaturated blue maybe, and let's drop it in. Now, as you can see, we have covered the entire canvas and we don't want that, and here's why we flattened our artwork into one single layer. What I'm going to do is tap on the multiply layer and select clipping mask. As you can see, from now on, every time you clip a layer, it will be attached to this base, which is our drawing, and as you can see, it won't go outside of the borders. So right now, our character is pretty much in the darkness, and when we have such a dramatic shadow, we have the chance to really understand the head's shapes and volumes. So let's select our eraser, because today we are going to work with an eraser. So it's kind of a reverse process. What we are going to do is pretty much paint light into our character. First of all, let's assume that our light source is right here. I'm going to start with the eyes. One thing to remember when working with this technique is that the light will always hit the highest point of the face. In this case, because our light source is on the top right. If our light was coming from the bottom left, for example, we're going to highlight opposite side. So that is the concept you need to remember. And I always start by creating these harsh shadows. It will look weird at the beginning, but trust the process. This is also a great exercise to modulate your hand pressure, but we'll talk more about that later on. And as you can see, I usually start with a harsh line and then I soften as I go. I usually stay very soft on the hair because the highlight I already placed on the hair strands will do the job. And as you can see, this really helps to see all the little corners and deeper parts of the face that we want to highlight. And then I'm going to soften everything up. Our collarbone right here. See, what I do is a harsh line and then I soften it. Of course, you can be more precise if you're rendering a piece, but this is just an exercise to understand light. And it is very fun because you actually aren't touching your piece. It is a separate layer, so you can turn it on and off however you please. You can start over. You need to have a good balance between hard and soft shadows. Well, this is just stylistic at a certain point, but of course you do you depending on your artwork. At the beginning, you don't need to focus on the stylistic part, just try to visualize the volumes of the face. Of course, now this is very dramatic. We will soften it as we go and then add our details, which again, for the exercise, you don't really need to focus on details. See how all the parts of the face, like the nose, the bottom lip, cast a shadow. So I want to highlight this. As you can see, I'm not going over this part. Otherwise, no shadow under the nose. It's weird, right? And obviously, you can go to hue and saturation now and see how it looks in different environments. See how it changes the entire mood? You can also add some bounce light, and I usually like to use a complementary color for that. So I created a new layer and I clipped it. It will behave exactly like the other one. So let's set our layer to add. And what I'm going to do is select a nice light blue. This time I am going to go and hit the other side, just a tiny bit. And this effect kind of wraps the entire piece together, and you need to imagine another light coming from the bottom left. And that's it. Try this exercise and let me know how your character will look. One thing I get asked a lot is, how do I get to make lines like yours? Or my line art is too flat, how do I fix it? And assuming in the digital form, of course, you are using a good line art brush and a pen with pressure sensitivity, chances are that your lines need a little bit of practice. Most of the artists facing difficulties with line modulation are those who started drawing digitally, because they are missing or lacking that comparison with the real pencil feeling, which isn't mandatory if you're only interested in digital art, but trust me when I say that it helps a lot. So for today's exercise, we are going to work on your hand pressure both traditionally and digitally. And I am going to use a brush pen and also a soft pencil. This is an 8B. The brush pen will help you learn stability because this stroke will change under the slightest touch. So it's perfect to understand hand pressure and see how to modulate it. And the pencil requires a stronger pressure instead, so you can really feel both sides of the metal. What I used to do was filling pages of lines. Simple as that, but following a criteria. For example, thin lines only first, then thicker lines, and once you get the hang of it, move on to more complex shapes like waves going up thin, going down thick, just like this. This might appear silly, but you have no idea of how useful it is, especially if you're new on hand pressure. Of course, then you can move into the digital canvas and do the same thing with your brush of choice, and finally see how you have improved. As I said before, for the fun things of all these exercises is that you can do them while watching a movie maybe, or bring your sketchbook to a coffee shop and draw there. It is more passive learning than anything, and the repetition will build muscle memory into your hand. Fun how our brain works. Let's move forward into the face, more particularly facial expressions. One of the best skills an artist can have is the ability of conveying emotions in their art. That involves the whole body, of course. If you're good, you can really make people feel and understand the emotions of a lamp or a robot that doesn't even have a face like Wall-E. So what's that element of the face that really makes you understand if a character is sad or happy or angry? Brows, of course, along with the eyes and the mouth. The position of Wall-E's head, the rotation of its eyes, emulate the movement of the brows, and it doesn't even have them. This is character design at its absolute finest. So let's go back to our head's shapes we've drawn before. Let's start with a simple facial expression. Let's choose this one, and let's make it happy. A happy facial expression usually means that our brows are very relaxed and soft, like this. Again, since this is an exercise, let's only give the indication of our facial features. And again, at this stage, it doesn't have to be perfect. But what if I want to make my character sad? One mistake I usually see new artists make is being scared of over-exaggerating the characters' faces. And this is the point of the exercise. We are going to draw very extreme expressions to get out of that comfort zone and really move our characters' brows and mouth. See how the facial features go along with the brows, how I over-exaggerated the arch, because in this case our character is crying and is very sad. I really want to showcase that if we keep our brows too flat, well, the mouth does most of the job in this case and it isn't really conveying sadness, so we really need to exaggerate the brows in this case. And same thing goes for the mouth. I want the character here to be very, very upset and angry. The arch is almost touching our lashes because the character is very, very angry. If this was a full body, let's assume, there are emotions that you want to convey with the entire body. So maybe her shoulders would go along with it, or maybe her hand is like a fist. So these are all little elements that help shape a character and what a character is actually feeling. Now, it doesn't matter if your art style isn't really established yet. You need to do this even with the simplest shapes. The exercise is to do it in the simplest way possible. So, for example, let's simplify this. Let's make this character very, very happy and joyful. And even if the eyes were open, you can just simply make the indication of the lashes as I did right here. What we're looking for here is just the emotion. See, one of the things that differentiate real art from AI generated images, for example, is exactly this, the ability to convey an emotion. I don't know if you noticed, but most AI generated images are very uncanny when it comes to people, and both realistic, which let's not talk about that, and of course even art is very uncanny, very weird. It almost looks like the character doesn't doesn't have a soul, and this is what we are trying to learn right here, which is something we have the ability to do, and by doing this simple exercise you will build that knowledge into your hand, into your brain, and you will train your eyes to understand how an emotion should be portrayed. I can express an emotion even by using a dot. Even the most simple art style can be able to convey an emotion if you really know how to place each little element. Have fun, create different facial expressions, both in the most simple ways and in the most intricate ways if you wish, and see how your art improves over time. One thing I always say is that the best way to train your eyes is to look at real-life pictures. This sounds very straightforward, but hear me out. In this case, what we need to do is actually look at a photo and really focus on details our brain would normally bypass, because we are used to look at the bigger picture. This brings us to the visualization exercise, which involves both ways to see subjects and train your eyes. I shared this with you in the past, but I never showed you, so here we are. There are many different websites to do this. This is the easiest and most immediate one I found. It simply gives you random photos to recreate with a timer, and you can also choose the type of photos you're interested in, set a timer and start practicing. Doesn't matter if at the end of the timer your art is not done yet, just go next. This type of exercise is fantastic to build imagination and improve your photographic memory, and over time this will allow you to draw from imagination only if you don't have access to reference, which is very fun and an important skill to have in my opinion. Of course, I am not demonizing references. It's great to learn by using a reference. This is literally what we are doing now, but I think it is also important to train our imagination. This type of website are also very useful to draw props, objects of common use that we don't really visualize perfectly. For this exercise, I also suggest you to get a sketchbook. It will be much easier to actually see your improvement and how your drawings will get more detail and evolve as you progress. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed these small exercises, and I hope you find them fun to recreate. Oh, I forgot to mention in the last video, but I actually opened a separated ASMR channel where I only post my uncut long drawing footages. It is kind of like an archive for me, but also a way for you to relax and watch me draw. The channel has just been created. There are only 2 videos in there, but if you like ASMR or just watching people drawing, consider subscribing. Thank you so much for your support and for being here, and I'll see you all next Sunday. Take care. Bye!